Welcome back, guys. I am very ill. I haven't been feeling great lately. I've been kind of bedbound, but I've managed to get enough strength out of me to do this video. So hopefully you guys love what this is. You love this video. Today I want to talk about something that actually happened last Sunday at Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park. I think it was something that I've wanted to see for a long time, but I never got the chance to see it. And unfortunately I wasn't there, so I totally missed it. But of course there are videos. And those videos kind of tell the story, and the story is there were some amazing apologists, Christian apologists at the corner who were forcing things onto the Dawah guys that they did not want to deal with, could not deal with, they had no answers to, and it was absolutely brilliant. We got to see Muhammad Hijab act basically like a small child, could not deal with an argument, a very basic argument, and had to throw it back on the Christian, pull lots of funny faces, and just end up flexing for some reason. And I want this to serve as a basis for understanding that the Dawah guys have no good arguments, that there is nothing there anymore. It's dead, it's intellectually dead. It was shot in like as a fish in a barrel a long time ago. There is nothing there. It's rhetoric, it's obfuscation, it's begging the question, it's ad hominems. In a way that we haven't seen before. Well, maybe not in a way that we haven't seen before, but it's their usual thing, but it's more pronounced, and it just happened in such a concentrated amount last Sunday. The first one I want us to go through is David versus Muhammad Hijab. So just to give you some context here, Muhammad Hijab has been told that he needs to go and speak to David. Now, he doesn't know who David is, he's never talked to David or met David, but for whatever reason, he's been told by someone he needs to go speak to this guy, so he does. And of course, when he does, a huge crowd goes with him who want to see Muhammad Hijab do his thing and humiliate and all that stuff to different people, right? But that's not going to happen this time. In fact, something very different is going to happen. Let's take a look.
In one of the letters, it's mentioned that the slave must submit himself to even to the cruel slave owners. So even though slave owners are cruel, he has to submit himself to them. Rasulullah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the Holy Prophet, he forbade even slapping one slave, let alone submitting himself.
Okay, for the first part here, David is already having a conversation with another Muslim. Now you might think, okay, this guy looks like he's a little nervous. Well, he has every right to be, because he doesn't really know what he's saying. He doesn't really have many good answers. And David's just going through some basic questions, digging into his faith, and then happily answering questions about his own faith. And this guy doesn't seem like he knows what he's doing. In fact, to be honest with you, I'm pretty sure that's why Muhammad Hijab was called over, because this guy just didn't know how to handle the situation, couldn't handle David's questions.
Right. Okay. So with Muhammad, right, you couldn't slap slaves, but you could still just sell them, right?
Aqil, mashallah. The reason why I'm not intervening is because he's saying all the right things. You know, keep going, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I didn't hear it. Sorry, I didn't hear it.
Keep it going.
I absolutely love that. So, Muhammad Hijab is there. He just decides to take this moment to just intervene and just to give this little script of how I'm really proud of you. I love what you're doing. You know, you're saying the right things. I don't need to intervene because you're just doing so well. You're gonna watch exactly what happens now, because it doesn't end out that way. And also, I just love the crowd's response, because they know that that's just so awkward and forced. It's such a obvious way of trying to sound tougher than you really are. Like, oh, I don't even intervene. This guy's got it. He knows what he's doing. Oh, this is brilliant. This is fine. Let's see how that plays out.
Punishment is different than torturing a slave.
Okay, so why would you even mention that supposedly you can't hit your slave when you can kill them?
I mean,
what is that? Muhammad Hijab just starts randomly touching the guy, like just like randomly like prodding him. I don't understand. How can you just make a big thing about how you don't need to intervene, this guy's got it, and then you randomly start touching the guy a few seconds later to try and tell him something? What do you need to tell him anything? You just made a big deal out of the fact this guy knows like everything he needs to know to defend Islam, to defend the great deen. But, you know, obviously not. It fell apart in literally about 10 seconds.
In terms of qasas, like for example, if a slave, even like had.
Do you guys want to talk amongst yourselves, or are you doing it with me? What are you doing?
Like, for example, if a slave commits fornication, the slave might.
They literally start having a conversation with themselves. Trying to figure out what the answer is before they tell it to David, and David's just stood there like, what? Oh, that's brilliant. I absolutely love that. As you can tell, they don't really have any answers. Mohammed Hijab is trying to work with this guy to quickly get an answer so that they can return to David later on. Maybe they can put the answer in the post and then they can send a letter to David, and maybe that would be the best way of doing this. David rightly points out, why are you guys having a chat now? Why has this now become 2-on-1? Why are you unable to let this guy defend his faith when you made a big deal about it? You were like, this guy is doing brilliantly. Don't need to intervene whatsoever. 10 seconds later, I need to intervene. This guy is losing terribly.
If a slave commits fornication, the slave master has to actually carry out punishment, like corporal
No,
punishment.
but hold on. Sorry. Because remember in the Quran it says that, what do you call it?
Whoa, hold on there. Hold on there. Don't say that. My grand champion in this debate, the one I have complete confidence in. Whoa, 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 whoa. Hold your horses there. You've said something wrong. Let Mohammed Hijab guide you to the truth. Inshallah, you will have a decent argument, at least by next week.
Brother, speak to him. Yeah,
I'm not entirely sure what we're talking about
when it
anymore.
comes to
If you guys want to talk, go ahead and talk.
I can make mistakes. Sometimes clarifications have to be made. It's not an issue.
Now you actually have another Christian brother who's now come in to say, look, why are you guys just having a weird dialogue together? That's not... You've now just become like an all-married couple and you just want to have a chat with each other calmly during the middle of a debate with a big crowd around you. How on earth does that make any sense? And I think they try and sort of diffuse this, but they kind of do know that they kind of should be debating.
I couldn't see.
So why didn't it wait a few hours? Let him carry on, man. Hey, man, let them do their thing.
Well, basically, look, it is kind of like this.
So I want to show you that there. Just look very closely. He nudges him. He's literally nudging him with his arm, with his elbow, and he's just trying to get his attention so he can look at him. And look, the guy even looks at him, and he gives him the correct thing to say. The Mohammed Hijab approved apologetic. How to defend Islam, the Mohammed Hijab way.
It's not okay if kids die.
No, I mean he never specifically ordered the attack on children and women.
Gosh, that's so embarrassing to watch. Mohammed Hijab does another elbow nudge, and then you can hear him just about, hopefully the camera picks that up. He says, did he order the attack or did he tell him to attack? And this is of course talking about Muhammad when he was responsible at least for ordering the attacks that led to the deaths of women and children. As you can imagine, that's a bit of a difficult thing to defend. But using the Mohammed Hijab approved method, we're going to give it a try. He gives him this nudge and he tells him to say these words. And the guy turns around looking completely defeated and just says, yeah, but, did he order the attack? And it's such a shame. It's just like a shambles. It's like Mohammed Hijab is keeping Dawah alive by the skin of his teeth. He's grabbing them by what do you call those strings that those puppeteers have? It's he's got dais on a puppet string and he's just pulling these strings to get them to say what he wants. Because if he lets go, all the dais just collapse because there's literally nothing else. They're just relying solely on the support of Mohammed Hijab.
But today, you can still be liable for that punishment.
Well, even the sheep count.
Again, your God apparently drowned Egypt, killed the people of Lot. I'm sure they had sheep, I'm sure they had camels, I'm sure they had donkeys.
Someone in the audience just decides to heckle and asks about the beloved donkeys, because for some reason donkeys are the only thing that's worthy of saving in Islam. I don't know why, but if you ever hear any apologetic in the park, it's always, what happened in Numbers 31:18 to the donkeys? What happened in 1 Samuel 15:3 to the donkeys? What happened to the donkeys? They don't care about anything else. Children, women, no. It's the donkeys that really matter. So he brings this up and David just starts responding to the audience member saying, look, in your book, Allah does literally the same thing. He does it in the flood. He does it in Sodom and Gomorrah. So there are multiple occasions where Allah himself probably kills lots of donkeys. Let's see how Mohammed Hijab takes that.
So why is it when Allah is fine?
Are you speaking to others now?
You were doing it first, so please calm down.
No, I don't mind. Do you want to speak
I don't mind either.
to me? You want to speak to me?
What do you want? Are we done? Or do you want homeboy to go ahead?
Very good.
You want to take over?
Yeah, let me just say a couple of words to him. I've never met him before. They told me to come to him and speak to him.
Oh, okay.
Hey,
No, but it was a really interesting discussion. I really appreciate it.
fair enough. But when Allah does it, it's cool. But then when God does it in the Bible, it's not cool.
No, because our issue with this is that you're making a false equivocation.
So Mohammed Hijab tries to make this issue that, oh, you're talking to other people now. which of course is massively ironic given that's all he did throughout the entire debate. It wasn't even his debate. He just walked into it and started elbowing this guy, trying to give him some Muhammad hijab approved answers, and didn't realize his own hypocrisy there, which was comedy gold in my opinion. David says, look, are you guys done here? And the answer to that is yes. And then the guy just says, you know what, Muhammad hijab, he puts his hand on him, he's like, you did a good job. Which is funny because wait, no he didn't. You literally had to jump in at every second to defend this position because he couldn't defend it himself. He didn't know enough about Dawah to give the pre-recorded Dawah script answers that he needed to give. Or in other words, without lies, Islam dies. But to be fair to this guy, he was respectful and he shook his hand, he shook David's hand. So I mean that's at least, you know, good for him for keeping his character and doing well in that regard.
They are still both from God, so they're still valid.
Accepted that it's both from God. We think everything is from God, yeah?
Everything.
Yes, everything is from God. وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. You don't will except that God wills, right? So we do believe that everything goes back to the will of God. That's why we say inshallah, mashallah, all those words, meaning the will of God is always in everything, right? We do agree with that.
Even cannibalism?
Pardon? Yes, everything is good and the bad, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
all
we
right.
believe that everything goes back to the will of God. Nothing happens except through the will of God.
So the conversation at this point switches to basically how you can justify these things. And Muhammad brings up the idea that everything is from the will of Allah, and the will of Allah determines these things, right? So it's not just the good and the evil, it's both. He doesn't just determine good, he determines good and evil. And to be honest, I'm not sure how you would even make a distinction then if he's doing both, and it's both coming from him directly. And he admits this in the debate, which is a very weird thing to admit because you now have, as David points out, an evil God. So how that is responsible for every evil act any human being does. If a human being assaults somebody, it's God who actually does that because according to the Islamic view, God creates that action and gives that action to that person. So in other words, the will of Allah is always carried out because Allah is always the one who creates and always gives you that action. You don't have freedom. There is no freedom here. You're just a determined machine that Allah has wound up to do his will. And his will includes evil and good. And you don't get to do anything with that. That's just life, basically.
That's not something which,
Bad. Oof, that's not a problem.
that's not a problem because that's something which Christians also accept.
We don't
In
think-
fact, you know, especially if you go into the Calvinist school of thought, it's even more pronounced. They talk about divine predestination. Calvin wrote a whole tract on it. I can give you the references.
I am not a Calvinist, first of all.
No problem.
And I'm not even sure Calvinists would hold to the idea that evil comes from God.
Of course they do. They mention it. Augustine mentions it in his book. I don't think you know your...
So what is his great response to this? Like, how on earth does he defend an evil God? He does it in the best way, the Dawah approved way. Christians also do it. That's his response. That's all he's got. Christians also do it. And he comes out with some of the most obscene, just outright false statements here. One of the big branches of Christian thought is Calvinism, of which there are just tons and tons of Calvinists all over the place. Calvinism is so popular. And I'm just thinking, no, it's not that popular. I mean, it's a sub-branch of the Protestant church. It's not as if it's one of the three main churches. So how on earth does he get this understanding? Well, he's just making it up as he goes along. He does his typical, let's now talk about Christianity because I've accidentally just shown that Allah is evil. Can you imagine how this guy does this stuff? He just goes home and he's like, damn, today I accidentally told a Christian that Allah was evil. But luckily, I switched it back onto him. So good job, I did well. No one's ever going to question the things I just said there. They're going to go straight to the Christian thing. It's all good. End of the day, another Dawah. So there's just one last bit in this one, and then I'll kind of wrap this up. Actually, this is another bit as well. But this guy that David was originally debating, he kind of hangs around after him and Muhammad hijab get into a dialogue. This guy, he's got his phone out, and he's got his phone out for a while, and he wants to bring this verse up before he leaves. He's got this gotcha moment, and he kind of like tries to say it, and then gets cut off by Muhammad hijab. So I know what it is. We all know as the audience what this verse is. It's Isaiah 45, ayah? Sorry, too much Islamic study. Isaiah 45 verse 7, which some translators translate as God creating evil. Now, David does a great response to this, but this guy, he thinks he's got this smackdown argument. He's thinking he's going to redeem himself. And so after Mujab keeps putting him down and telling him not to say anything, he finally gets his moment as he's about to leave to say this verse.
I I am the Lord and there is none else. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil.
Oh, hold on a second there. But before you run away, does that say that God is the origin of evil, or God can create evil? Two different things.
Okay, so let's go.
So as you can see, the guy absolutely legged it. He did not he did not want any answer to this. He did not want any response to this. He wanted to say what he had to say and then run. As you can see, he's very confident in his words. I kind of feel sorry for him. Like, I think... And it's just the way that Mohammed pats him on the back, like, yeah, well done, mate. Great stuff. Cheers for that. Yeah, cheers. Please go now. Oh, it's so sad. It's like, it's watching people who have been lied to try and defend it, realize they can't defend it, realize they can't even give an attack on Christianity because they know it's going to be refuted in 3 seconds. And they have to get these people like Mohammed Hijab, who is basically just there to absorb the damage, basically, because no one else can. And even he, I think, is struggling. Last little bit as well. This footage was actually given to us from Street Mike Live. He often goes to Speaker's Corner and records things live. He was zooming in on Mohammed Hijab's face for a lot for some reason. I don't understand why. But he happened to do it when Mohammed Hijab was getting extremely agitated at the fact that he didn't have an answer to what David was bringing. And just to cut it short, David was bringing up a hadith. I'll show the hadith on the screen, but basically it's something that says that people are determined to go to either heaven or hell, regardless if they're good or bad. And he couldn't get him an answer, so let's look at some of the absolute amazing facial expressions that Mohammed Hijab gives.
Institutes in America, like evangelical institutes, that do hold that position and teach it in their seminaries.
Okay,
Majority of them do.
Again, this would not constitute the majority of our
I don't
Christians.
know. I'm not saying it. I don't have a sociological study. Do you have it?
So when it comes, however, to Islam, unfortunately...
Excuse me. In the academy, Calvinism is one of the biggest and most defended positions, clearly.
A good way to avoid the problem of worshipping an evil god is to not actually have an evil god to begin with. Mohammed Hijab's position is completely undefensible, and the thing is I think the average Muslim knows it's indefensible. I've been looking at some videos where they try to explain the Islamic belief on free will and determinism, and it's a mess, basically. There really isn't much there that you can latch onto as some sort of sustenance. Instead, Islam has this thing where people give you like false wisdom. Like, it sounds wise, but when you actually strip a lot of it away, it's intentionally vague, very cult-like, in all honesty. But what we do know in Christianity, apart from maybe the Calvinists, is that you have a genuine choice in your own salvation, in that God is always the first one to act. He's the first one to always give grace, but you have a free choice to make about whether or not you accept that grace or you reject it. And because of that free choice, you have a meaningful life where your decisions have actual consequences that you're a part of. It isn't just determined by an evil God, it's actually a loving God who's given you the option to make a choice. You can either pick the good option or you can pick the bad option, but you're never forced into doing that. This is what I think is a huge distinction between Christianity and Islam. In Christianity, you're loved, you can act in the way that you want, just like a loving father lets his son act the way that he wants. Doesn't mean that he's free from consequences, but it means that he's free to pick his own life. In Islam, you're not free to pick your own life. It's just what Allah's decided for you. You might be a really good Muslim, but you end up going straight to hell. You might be a really bad Muslim, or potentially maybe even someone who isn't a Muslim at all, but then actually get into heaven anyway, simply because Allah willed that to happen. That to me sounds like a fickle and arbitrary God. Come to Jesus Christ. 1,000 times better. God bless you all. I hope you have a great day.